Hey, Nelson, alcoholic addict. That's not my real name. That is my pen name that I use here at LOL Sober. I was traveling last week and I arrived at one of my airline gates early. So I pulled up a chair and just hung out for a while. And I got to tell you, I noticed that there were a lot of angry people that day. One guy got to his gate 2 minutes too late and he was pissed that they had closed the gate and the flight was flying out for Newark without him on it. He did not like that very much. And then, an older couple showed up and they quickly realized they had walked to the end of the airport and were at the wrong gate. And the guy was so mad and he hustled off like in a huff to see where they were supposed to be. And he looked at the board and he started to come back, and I saw his wife. His wife just looked mortified. I don't know if she was responsible for saying the wrong gate or what, but I watched him when he came back, and I couldn't quite hear what he was saying, but I could tell how he was saying it. He was like whisper yelling with his teeth grit, and as he raged, I couldn't help but see this giant glob of spit shoot out of his mouth and land on the floor. It was freaking disgusting. It was like Cujo with just rabid slobber flying out of his mouth. It was rough. I'd say I was about 48% of the way there to puking when they got up and just left in a tizzy. Took a few deep breaths and tried to block out the fact that some random old dude just splatter bombed half of the floor in front of me with a huge loogie. It was so disgusting, man. And as soon as they left, and as soon as my likelihood of barfing subsided, I took a moment to be grateful. Back when I was drinking, I spent about 95% of my time numbing all of my uncomfortable feelings, and that included anger for sure. I would just stuff it down and get blasted on pills or booze or whatever else I could get my hands on. And I guess you could say it worked, but it didn't really. None of those resentments really went anywhere. I just packed them into a bag and stuffed them under the bed. And so, the other 5% of the time, I would occasionally erupt. I think most people who knew me always thought I was pretty chill. So I wasn't getting into fist fights, but I got right up to the edge of fist fights a few times and got into big skirmishes with friends and family. And because when my anger boiled over, I would sometimes be literally spitting mad, just like that old dude at the airport. I'll tell you, one morning, about 20 years ago, I think it was, I was extremely hungover, and I might have still been high and drunk from the night before. It was hard to tell anymore at a certain point in addiction. And so I was driving in New York City one morning. I was going through the Lincoln Tunnel, and I kind of like dozed off, and I rear-ended another car. And it was a very minor accident, and the guy in front of me, he didn't even get out of his car. So, that sounds really bad, right? Well, hold on. The story is not over. About 15 minutes later, I'm in Manhattan driving on a side street, and I rear-ended another car. It was a big SUV, and the guy put his car in park in the middle of a New York City street. He got out of his car, and he walked around to look at his bumper, and it was, luckily, I think it was another very minor fender bender, so it didn't look like there was any damage at all, not even any scratches. So he just kind of like raised his arms in anger and went back to get in his car again. And I put down my window and sort of sheepishly yelled, "Sorry, man, sorry, apologies." And I said something about like a delivery guy had walked out into the street and distracted me, and that wasn't true. Of course, I dozed off because I was either passing out or hungover and falling asleep. I don't even know. Well, I don't know what happened with this dude, but he didn't get in his car. He got extremely angry right as he was about to. And so he walked back toward my car, started yelling at me, and he was so pissed. And he was like a small guy, older guy, probably 60 years old, smallish dude. And I nodded my head and I said, sorry, 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 sorry. I'd say for like 30 seconds as this guy just berated me. But then at a certain point, something just exploded out of me. He just kept coming at me and standing outside my window. And it was a pretty threatening thing to be happening, right? So I got to a point where I just flipped from feeling apologetic to feeling like this guy needs his ass whipped and it needs to happen by my hands. And so before I even knew it, I kind of like blacked out. I threw open my car door in the middle of the street and I went after him. And he seemed to realize pretty quickly, like, oh shit, this guy isn't going to take my shit. And he started backing away quickly toward his car. But I was enraged and I was engaged. So I chased him to his car door. And when I grabbed the handle, thank God he had gotten in and locked it. And I could see through the window. He was sufficiently scared. So as I walked back to the car, I was just like, oh man, like, what is that all about? And, but I also felt like I had somehow won. Like I felt like I was a real winner in this encounter. And God, it's just like thinking back for about 10 seconds there, I was spitting mad, just like that airport guy. Boy, let me just say how thankful I am that I do not live like that anymore. Somebody asked me recently, what's the maddest that you've been in the past year? And I could not come up with an answer, honestly. I feel so blessed to be alive and to be sober, to be able to work through all the anger that used to get stuffed in a box and packed away in my brain. So I don't really have explosions like that anymore. And I remember telling the guy who asked me that, I said, can't think of one. An hour or so later, though, something did come to mind. I had an important work meeting one time a few months ago, and I tried clicking on the Zoom. I tried clicking on it, I'd say 2,000 times, just over and over again, as the clock ticked down to the meeting, and my computer just kept giving me a hard time, and I couldn't figure it out, and I was walking from room to room in my house, just thinking maybe the Wi-Fi here would be better than the Wi-Fi there, and I was just simmering angry, and I was smashing my teeth together, a lot like that dude in the airport. Luckily, nobody was home because I let out some real animalistic growls and grunts that I wasn't very proud of. I'll tell you that. But eventually, the Zoom just like suddenly worked, and I got into the meeting at the last possible moment, and everything was okay. And that was not the first time I've gotten extremely frustrated about technology stuff. So maybe that's something I do need to take a look at. Like, what specifically makes my head explode about computer and gadget stuff? I don't know, but it certainly does. Oh, and I should say, just in the nick of time, I'm being told I need to change my company password on this computer that I'm currently working on. I need to do it in the next few days, and I screw it up every time. So perhaps a computer-heavy fourth step will be in my future. I'll go through all the resentments I have against computers and technology, and hopefully I won't be spitting any loogies on the ground and making other people sick. So thank you so much for letting me share.